This episode is sponsored by Arc IT, and you'll find out more about them later on in the episode. Hi there, I'm Evan Troxel. Welcome to my podcast about how technology is changing the architectural profession. Welcome back to the podcast. My name's Evan Troxel, and in this episode, I welcome Petr Mitev. That's spelled P-E-T-R if you're Googling him, and so obviously he's a fellow vowel skipper. I'm sure he's been doing it a little bit longer than I have, but he hasn't removed all the vowels like I have. So take that for what it's worth. So who's Petr? Petr is a technology leader with a background in software development and product management. And like many of my other guests, his education was in traditional architecture, but he's pivoted to tech. He previously led R&D at NBBJ, among other firms, which allowed him to merge his background in formal design with his passion for empowering technology. Currently, he's the CTO for Enscape, where he creates technology and user-facing software to empower and improve the design and delivery of the built environment. A lot of this episode is dedicated to talking about tools that people want to use versus tools that people have to use. I love this little snippet that I pulled from his personal website, where he says his main focus now is leveraging his understanding of technology and the AECO industry to create solutions that effectively improve the environment around us and answer the most pressing questions we face today as builders of tomorrow: social, environmental, and ethical. Fantastic stuff. This was a great conversation, so I can't wait for you to hear it. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Petr Mitev. Petr, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you very much. Excited to be here.
So you've recently moved to Enscape from NBBJ, and I'm interested in that story, or what you want to talk about with that story. I also am interested in today talking about kind of where we're at with rendering technology. Obviously, Enscape has a huge amount of mind share out there right now, so that would be fun as well. So maybe we can start off with just your kind of recent change away from an architecture firm into a rendering technology firm, or tell us what's going on in your world.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's an interesting change as well. I think the work that we were doing at NBBJ was and of course still is. I mean, the work is continuing without me, but the work was exactly in the right vein, or at least for me, in terms of my kind of view on the effects technology can have on the design and delivery of the built environment. And the great thing there was that we were, exploring really a huge variety of topics from a lot of different angles. And, no two projects, no two questions were really identical. So we really had a lot of creative opportunity and creative freedom to solve those problems in new and, potentially experimental ways, which I think was exciting, not just for us to do, but also for our clients to see and experience the benefit of it. Right. And if we didn't have that positive feedback, we would have been out of a job, of course.
Right,
and we wouldn't have had a huge team the size that it grew to at our peak. So I think it was definitely exciting work. And for me, the opportunity or rather the thing that pushed me to maybe seek for other employment opportunities was to really just try to do this at a bit of a bigger scale. At the end of the day, I think, you have a business model for an architecture firm, which is just at its core, really conflicting with a business model of something like a tech company or software company. And that poses some very natural and expected limitations on that kind of work. And it's just reality. I can't say it's good or bad. I don't know. The fact of the matter is that, NBBJ pays the bills with design work. That's always going to be the priority. That's what the firm is the best at. Mm-hmm. I'm sure they'll continue to be there. But for somebody like me, it also raises the question, well, how do I take this knowledge that I have and reach as many people as I can if I do believe that what I'm doing or able to do is a positive force for change in the industry. And the Enscape opportunity was a huge, I think, bit of luck and timing, because initially I frankly wasn't even sure if I wanted to continue in AEC. there was like I said, really great timing. Enscape was kind of in the middle of reinventing itself from the startup phase to the mature company phase. And with that, we had a lot of exciting moves that, I mean, they started even before me, but I think it begins with the founders kind of taking a step back and moving to our newly formed executive board, and then people like myself and our new CEO Christian Lang joining and really trying to take the company to the next phase where we need to be. So we realigned, I think, almost perfectly in our conversations on what we see happening in the industry and where we see the potential for having a really positive and significant impact. And here we are. It's been a short time, but to be honest with you, it feels a lot longer than it has. And I think we're onto some good things, and I hope that people are going to be excited to see them in the coming months and years.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've recently left a proper architecture firm, in famous invisible podcasting air quotes as well, and as far as the proper part goes, and into technology space for the exact same reason, which is to like somebody's got to step back, and obviously people are doing this, so the somebody is not super rare, but it's in the grand scheme of architecture or AEC, it is more rare for people to step back and survey the entire landscape and try to figure out ways to make it better. And you're not going to maybe apply that evenly everywhere, but you can figure out where you can apply it based on, your interests, your skills, your talents, all of those things. And so I'm curious to see how that went from, because I don't know exactly what you did at NBBJ, but I imagine it wasn't rendering technology. So maybe talk about what you did at NBBJ, but then how you focused in on this, because it sounds like, I know that that's going to be a little tricky because they're, like you said, that your vision's aligned, and that is bigger than just the means and methods of how you're going to do that through rendering. So
yeah,
maybe take us through a little bit of that decision-making process or how that happened.
I mean, I do agree with you first that, the vision's kind of more important than the means and methods by which we do it. So, I mean, at NBBJ, I was quite lucky to lead the design computation team, which was really an international team, very multidisciplinary, with a very diverse mix of specialties as well. Some people were more design technologists. They were working in visual programming and other kind of tools. We also had proper software developers, UI, UX designers that were more comfortable working in code and outputting things that, you could call more enterprise ready or however you want to classify them. So we all kind of came together under this one banner to again tackle those very unique problems that, the different projects are asking. But you're right, it wasn't a direct, we were never really focusing on visualization or even interactive visualization specifically. I think our tools and methods were about the same as you could call, a programming language or a tech stack. And that wasn't really the more important link, exactly like you said. It was about the idea, the vision to create things that are accessible, things that help share knowledge and skills rather than reinforce these, existing silos that the industry has had for quite some time. And I really do believe that, I mean, to use Enscape as an example, that is really at the core of what we're doing and what we're trying to do more of, is that democratization of something that used to be, kind of on a pedestal and accessible to only, a handful of people with specialized knowledge or a big enough budget or whatever have you. But, we feel that skill set, that power is much more effective if we all can use a piece of it.
Totally. Yeah. That's a great way to frame it. And so maybe before we get, I would love to talk about how you guys kind of see that or what the vision is there. But before we get there, let's play a little bit of Remember When. So how far back do you go with rendering and maybe paint a picture of where things started for you in that realm?
For me personally, I mean, oh, wow. Now my memories are coming back. I thought I had an answer, but that wasn't the right answer. This is awesome.
This is super fun,
actually,
right? Like this.
It is. No, it is.
It totally is.
This is a creative technique I'm going to have to steal from you.
Yeah.
So I was going to say it started architecture school, but that would be a bold-faced lie. That's so not true. I started messing around with rendering when I think I was in high school, if not middle school. And it wasn't specifically for buildings. I was doing just abstract things, really for the most part. I was kind of experimenting. It was still at the time where I thought I wanted to be an artist, and before my parents, engineers by the way, before they brought down the hammer and said, "Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know if that's going to happen." So I used rendering technologies. I think it was Cinema 4D that I was the
Mm,
heaviest in back in the day, with the various engines that you could kind of equip to it. And then in architecture school, that became a lot more purpose driven. It was less about a piece of art or having fun, and it was more about portraying a story, telling a story, and getting people to see what you see. So I think back then the tools of the trade were not real time technologies. Obviously, we had the CPU based renderers,
yeah.
which was anguish for everybody in the computer lab, at midnight.
Yeah. You're old school when you did CPU rendering.
Oh man, yeah,
Yeah. Render networks, render farms. Yeah. Setting them up over.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, if you were lucky, you had a render farm. If
Right.
not, your little MacBook was over there running boot camp and overheating because you got this like dual core whatever processor
Right.
trying to compute light bounces. But that kind of does form in large my vision today, because I see where Enscape is right now, and I'm thinking, well, if I had this back in school, or really any of the firms that I worked for when I interned, I mean, this would have been a huge game changer
Yeah.
on a lot of different levels. And there are a lot of firms that are still in the same spot today. So, I mean, I think that's an opportunity for us to help them.
Yeah, totally. I remember. So as soon as you said the memories are flooding back, and if I would have said it started in architecture school, that would have been a lie. It's the same for me. I didn't realize it though until
Yeah.
you said that. And for me, it was like I downloaded an app on my old. I had one of the very first Power Macintoshes, and it was
Hmm.
it was a Pixar application. And I know that RenderMan technology has been around forever, but I think it was like one of the first versions of RenderMan, and it was like you could download these weird little 3DM files from the internet, and they weren't Rhino 3DM files, or maybe it had a different extension, but it was something you throw in there, and then you would put in keyframes and animate it, and it would render it, and it was very CPU, but it was just kind of a toy at that point. Although I'm sure
Yeah.
Pixar was doing something entirely different with it. They were just making a piece of it available for people to mess around with. And then I learned 3D. I learned Form Z, and Form Z had a ray
Hmm.
tracer. And oh my God, 18 hours cooking for one image, right? Because you used glass, and you had reflective materials, and you had transparent materials. And when you stack transparent objects in front of other transparent objects, and all the stuff going on there, it would just, exponentially make it take forever. And that was probably for like a 640 by 480 image. I mean, it was nothing big at all. There was no high
Yeah.
def back then. And to think how far it's come, I remember hearing a story about the very first Toy Story, right? And so speaking of Pixar and CPU rendering and having render farms, and it was like that movie took over 70,000 hours to render.
Right.
It was anywhere from probably 35 minutes to 30 hours per frame. And it's like, it's just amazing how many frames are in that movie. I mean, I think that was when I was teaching at the university, and just talking about not only where things came from, so people could understand kind of the foundation of modern image making technology, but just like we take it for granted. And people don't think when they see an animation, because of real time rendering nowadays, I imagine, and because it looks so effortless, that every second has 24 to 30 frames in it, and every one of those images has to get rendered. And now it's like it's just an afterthought. You don't even have to think about that. It's really interesting to me. So and maybe let's hit a middle step here, which is like, where did real time come into the picture? Is it strictly from video game technology like Quake or Half-Life, or was it something else?
I mean, I think there's probably no shortage of people that can answer that more intelligently than I can. But I mean, I think that's one of the biggest driving forces. I don't know if that's exactly where it started, but I would say it's highly likely. And if it didn't start there, then it was a huge driving force, because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you look at it from a financial perspective, right? In which there always has to be one, because otherwise things don't grow, things don't go anywhere if there isn't that backing. And I mean, the video game industry has been and will continue to grow very, very rapidly. So I see things like that as opportunities for technology to really thrive, and real time has recently, especially. I mean, you not only have software, but you have hardware, which is
Mhm.
getting more and more capable. So
Yeah.
we can actually deliver the things that we say we deliver, right? Because who hasn't seen those super cool tech demos that you would actually need a computer worth $40,000 to actually
Yeah.
achieve that level of quality. But until you actually deliver that to people, you're not really generating the value that you say you are.
Yeah. It's interesting for me to think about companies like Epic, with Unreal and Unity, and they've got these different companies kind of attempting potentially to break into AEC.
Hmm.
And compared to the markets they're used to, that just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, video games have the biggest audiences. AEC has got to be like a minor piece of the pie. It seems maybe they think it's something different than it is. I don't know.
No, I think you're right on. I mean, to be honest, from my perspective, that's kind of evident in their product. Like, yes, the underlying technology is quote unquote effective at solving the problem, but they're kind of approaching this without an understanding of the way this industry works
Hmm.
and how information actually moves. And I've seen a lot of these, again, like a really flashy sales pitch or a PowerPoint deck, and if you look at it intellectually, yeah, that sounds awesome. That sounds like
Right.
why isn't everybody doing this, right? But
Right.
but you and I that recently came off of an architecture firm experience, we all know there's underlying cultural, social, professional barriers to implementing these tools. So yeah, and you're right. Economically, financially, it is a small piece of the pie.
Hmm.
There is no world I can imagine where our market starts to even compete for a small fraction of the market share versus gaming.
Yeah. I mean, games have to have millions of
Hmm.
users.
Absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah.
and we don't see that happening anytime soon. I mean, even if you kind of make these types of tools business to customer instead of business to business, I think you're still dealing with an adoption curve, which is not insignificant, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly where companies like us have an opportunity to differentiate. If we really understand the core problem and
Hmm.
deliver a solution that is receptive not just to what the technology says we should do and need to do, but also to what the demands are of the real people in the industry, then I think that can be quite effective.
Well, it seems like you guys have captured the excitement. I don't know if you've captured the imagination. I think you have because you've made it so easy. Talk about what it's like for Enscape to experience the kind of growth that it has, and why you guys think that has happened, or why that has happened in AEC.
Yeah, the growth has been really, I mean, really staggering in a good way. And knock on wood, we continue to maintain a really rapid trajectory, even throughout this year. What are we? I think we're around 100 people now. We were around 80 when I joined a couple months
Mm,
ago, and we have, I think, about 25, 26 open positions right now today.
wow.
So and we recently moved to a new office 2 weeks ago because our old one got a little too small. So it's happening. But the big question is why. I
Hmm.
think for us, the foundation is that we have a product that people actually want to use. They like using it and they want to use it. We have sales, we have marketing, but and as great of a job as they do, we really think that the strength of the product is what's driving our success, and hopefully continues to drive our success. But that responsibility is on us. We need to continue listening to the community. We need to continue ensuring that we're delivering features and products that are relevant and that they have the right value proposition for the realities of our industry, which again, you and I know, but a lot of other vendors really have yet to learn.
How much of that is driven by the clientele that architects have, do you think, versus the architects' just excitement about using a tool that's fun to use and gives them what they want? Do you
Yeah,
think that there's an expectation set by clients of what they expect to see from an architect nowadays that's much different than what it used to be?
I think there probably is at least a little bit of that. I mean, we all kind of live in the same connected world where we have social media, internet, so
Yeah.
so you're exposed to these kinds of things when when you see that the new Amazon headquarters is announced, right, you see what that presentation looks like. So I do think clients are, scaling up their expectations as well. But, the good news is that the industry is also scaling up the software and the tools that are able to deliver that and make it more of a reality for, especially for the smaller firms, which when you consider it, they are the vast majority of architecture firms globally. And these aren't firms with a dedicated rendering department. Most of these firms are less than 5 people.
That's the biggest game changer right there, right? Is that now modern hardware can do this stuff without any special extra equipment. So any size firm has, like you said earlier on, and I think we could probably start to shift in this direction about the vision of democratizing these tools. At least that's what it sounded like you were alluding to. To me, that's really the game changer here. And that combined with the cost, because other tools that you're competing against either are cheaper but way harder to use. Like if you wanted to develop your own, Unreal app, right? You're going to be spending time in their visual programming or their coding section and applying material. Like it's just a lot. It's totally different. Or you've got something like a Lumion, and you've got other things out there that cost substantially more, but do different things. So you guys kind of seem to have hit a sweet spot there.
Yeah, it's a hard one to maintain, as I think you might imagine. But there's always a balance, and I think for all the other players that you listed, there's a similar balance, right? And we do want to make sure though that balance that we maintain is as little of a barrier as possible. And it's a hard question, especially when you look at the fact that we're a global company, and the purchasing power here may not be the same as the purchasing power elsewhere. And the global picture is very, very diverse, and it is a ongoing and a huge challenge to make that work. But for right now, we do believe that the value proposition is there. And for the tools that you mentioned, they're cheaper or they're free. They are, but like you said, you need to have a specialist and B, the time to actually create something that's at the same level. And again, for most people, you really don't have a dedicated rendering department or somebody else that's going to sit there and do that for you, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, that's really where that stuff does come in, right? It's when you want to create really custom stuff where you can swap out materials on the fly, and you can, et cetera, turn the lights on and off and all those things. But you've got to have somebody there who's basically acting as your own firm's game developer to create those experiences for people. And they are amazing, no doubt. And there is value there. But again, I think this comes back to that idea of the sweet spot of what do normal architects, and I don't mean that in any kind of degrading way, but it's like, what do most people need most of the time? And that really seems to be where you guys have inspired people.
Exactly. And especially these days, I mean, we're really shifting away from thinking ourselves as a visualization firm. We want to be, a visualization technology firm. We really want to be a firm that makes products and technologies for design. And yes, visualization is right now the way that we deliver our value to the design process, but we want to make sure that we keep a very keen focus on the process, and not kind of get a little potentially too enamored with the underlying technology, with the means and the methods, and again, I think that can be a huge differentiator for us, especially with the architects and designers that we were just talking about.
Let's take a break from this conversation and welcome back the sponsor for this episode, ArcIT. A common misconception that comes up when talking about technology, and actually IT in particular, is the thought that hiring a specialized company to help you with that is an expensive undertaking. And actually the opposite is often true, especially with a company like ArcIT, because they only work within our industry and they have the expertise and know-how to run IT for your business for a very reasonable price. In fact, they are honest and transparent with their pricing, and you can find it right on their website. And you can check that out at getarcit.com/pricing. So, as business owners and architects, how often do we think about our IT provider? Typically, only when things go wrong. And for many of us, unfortunately, this happens too often, especially with the latest emphasis on remote work. I know that I've had to deal with my fair share of IT fire drills. Not pleasant. ArcIT, however, is a very different kind of company. They specialize in serving architecture, design, and engineering firms, and their goal is to help you use technology as a competitive advantage. This means that they understand your technology stack, and they won't waste your time and money, learning how your tools work within your process. Combine that with industry-leading response times, proactive remote hardware management, and solid disaster recovery and backup solutions. That's something that everybody should be thinking of, honestly. And enterprise-grade security management. And yet, above all, these are just table stakes for a solid IT company. Arc IT goes a step further. They become your strategic partner when it comes to planning, budgeting, and integrating new technology into your business processes. So all of this sounds expensive, right? Nope, because Arc IT is highly specialized for our industry. Their pricing is on par, or in some cases even lower than other IT providers. Arc IT is transparent and even publishes the pricing right on their website. Speaking of their website, there's also something else you should check out when you're there, and that is their Design Under Influence blog and video series. Again, adding value to IT-type solutions across industry, all good stuff. So your business deserves a competent, responsive, and proactive IT partner. Reach out to my friends at Arc IT for a free consultation. So go to getarchit, that's getarchit.com, arc like architecture in the middle, and click Work with Us. So thanks very much to Arc IT for sponsoring this episode of the Troxel Podcast. And now let's get back to our conversation. The traditional tools that we kind of reminisced about and skipped over a bunch of them, but it's very under the hood. You have to want to tinker with specular highlights and reflectivity amounts and bump maps and normal maps and, lighting setups. And there's, I think I definitely got caught up in a lot of that back in the late 90s. And that specialty made you valuable to a firm, but it also kind of pigeonholed you into just being the rendering person.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays, by democratizing a tool or making all of that, it's very much a phone-based app approach where it's like, just do what I want it to do, right? I don't care about twiddling all the knobs. I don't need the full-on MIDI synthesizer with every single knob.
Right.
I don't want a tool like that. I want a tool that does what I want it to do quickly. And that is very delightful for people to use. But it also makes it so that somebody, like everybody just does rendering. I think that's one of the biggest shifts that I saw was away from a specialty visualization department where there was two or three people who were the expert specialists. It allowed them to move into more of what they wanted to do, which was the higher end stuff.
Right.
And it gave everybody, by introducing a tool like Enscape, it gave everybody the ability to just make beautiful renderings fast without going through this, very much so a constrained group where their calendar was booked for months to do renderings, to do animations, to do fly-throughs, to do custom app development or VR or any of those things, where this is really just said, okay, you with your desk, with your laptop, you can do this too. And that's exactly what people grabbed onto. And not only that, but it's fun to use. I think that's, to me, one of the biggest things, and this is why SketchUp is such a force of nature in architecture, or I think it's how it got there, it was just fun to use. That has so much more value than people think. Like, nobody shows up on a day-to-day basis and thinks that Revit is fun to use. I mean, there is a very small percentage of people who really think that, but for the most part, like, people fight Revit.
Yeah,
that is the opposite of what you experience with a tool like Enscape.
And that's our goal. It's a hard one. I'm not going to lie to you, and we don't always hit the mark, but it's something that we always think about. And I mean, when you think of the core demographic of people that are using our tool, and I kind of think of the professional background, the educational background, and what the design process is, like, this is not a group of people that I want them to fight with my tool. They're used to, I mean, the natural steps of the design process. There's exploration involved. There's an artistic nature to it. There's discovery. It's not this rigid, here, sit down, give me your technical parameters, I'll spit out what it's supposed to be. No, like we want there to be an interaction, a bi-directional feedback.
It's not a math problem, right? Yeah, it's an artistic exploration.
Exactly. This shouldn't be reduced to a formula. And I think when you turn it into a production process, you do that, right? Because you say, well, I'm only going to produce a rendering, I don't know, once every 2 weeks when we have a client presentation. Okay, great. What about the other changes in the middle? So I agree. Interaction design is, I mean, it is one of our most, if not the most important pillar.
Mm.
And we're very lucky to have some very, very talented folks there. And I mean, they're continuously being challenged though, because as you said earlier, nobody wants to see those knobs and sliders for the most part, but there are some experts that do want to tinker with them. So
Yeah.
our job is to figure out how we hide the complexity for the most part, but also have the ability to expose it to those that feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I kind of go back to the client expectation side of things, and not from image quality or photorealism perspective, but more from I want to see the latest renderings all the time perspective of where's my project in the pipeline. What updates do you have for me? I have a board meeting this week. What can you give me so I can show them where we're at? I think that this is one of the biggest drivers of real time nowadays. And I think that one of the tricky things here for architects has been to balance their infatuation with photorealism, right? Like I definitely have seen it skew that way. Like if I can have that, yes, I want it. But I also know that it's expensive from a time, from a hardware, from, expertise perspective, versus the much more, loose, desaturated, massing, less detail, taking people through that process. I think that we are jumping to photorealism a lot faster, not only because of these tools, but just because of the expectations that are out there, but also because tools allow us to get more detailed in such a quick way, but still be flexible with the geometry, which also helps that rendering side of the storytelling aspect of it. So we can keep pumping these boardroom meetings with real-time imagery with significant changes quickly. That to me is kind of a fascinating turn of events that's happened in, the last, I don't know, maybe decade, maybe not, maybe less.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think it's also been contributed by the fact that, more and more people are starting to trust the model as a central point of truth.
That's a
I mean,
really good
it's not
point.
100% there. It's quite far. There's still plenty of people that'll tell you that BIM's not really working. And I'm not here to debate that topic, but I think overall we've seen the industry shift to putting more intelligence in these models. And that's absolutely critical to getting these photorealistic, in air quotes, visuals out. Because again, I see a lot of these tech demos, but I always ask myself, okay, well, how many times have I actually seen this level of material fidelity in a BIM model?
Yeah.
Let's be honest here. It doesn't happen very often.
Right.
And it needs to be there. Otherwise, I don't care how good your rendering engine is, you're just not going to see anything. So there is some work there that, we can't really do. We kind of expect our customers to take the lead there. And as we see them continuing to do, then all we have to do is continue to support it and make sure that our output matches the level of fidelity that they're putting in.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see kind of, I remember working on projects and designing buildings, and it was very much like you said earlier, when it's like, we have agreed, it is in our contract to deliver you renderings at the end of design development period, and you will get 3 of them.
Yes.
And now it's like you can spit out, 50 images in an hour because you move the camera, save it, move the camera, save it, move the camera, save it. And you could potentially just have a Pinterest board continually updating that a client can just look at any day, any time, and there's the latest. And it, I just picked that off the top of my head, but it could be a website, it could be an app, it could be anything. And it's like, yep, here it is. Here's where your project is today. And I think that level of immersion for the client side to have the ability to peek anytime they want and see what's happening is pretty incredible. And to me, that's good for architecture.
It is. I agree. And it is an increasingly important area of focus for us as well, because again, I mean, today, if you have the benefit of being in a large team like NBBJ and having a design computation team or somebody similar, you can have somebody make that connection for you, where we maybe automate the export and maybe we tie it to a Pinterest or a website.
Mm-hmm.
But still, for most firms, I think that bridge is still yet another barrier. So we're kind of in the process of figuring that out right now and asking ourselves, what can we do to make it even easier? Because we agree. I mean, I know that architects are a little hesitant of full transparency, and
yes.
that's not for us to decide what they show.
Right. Right.
it's not for us to decide what they show or not show, but it is up to us to give them the tools to make that decision,
Yeah.
and to make it easy for them to decide when, where, with who. So yeah, hopefully some things coming down the line in that respect for us.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say otherwise, because I agree. Like, there is some amount of, you need there to be certain beats that your project hits that provide levels of payoff that isn't just a consistent hit of dopamine all the time, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
I
Right.
totally see that too. Like, but you're right, as far as the architect's ability to be in control of that in a much more easy way is welcomed. I'm sure it's fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean, how much of the process is about crafting a narrative, a visual narrative? We recognize that. Again, we want to focus on how design happens in this industry, and not just deliver a feature for the sake of saying, "Hey, here's a checkbox, we ticked it. Now go have fun with this," whether or not it actually works with your process.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I would love to hear kind of behind the scenes now, this, as if nobody else is listening to the show. Like, what is the vision for Enscape? Where do you guys, how are you going to go about democratizing this even further? And what inspired you about joining Enscape with that
Yeah,
alignment of vision?
I think those two questions are very, very related, and they're very related to the reason I'm here as well. My primary responsibility is making sure that our strategy from both a product standpoint and a technology standpoint is the right strategy in terms of helping solve the biggest problems for our customers.
Mm.
So, a large part of that is obviously where we are today, and how do we do that with Enscape real-time rendering, which is an ongoing discussion. But another discussion, and a huge chunk of my time, is figuring out, well, what's next. What are other products or solutions or avenues that we can explore that are equally relevant for our consumers? And again, this is all really good timing, because we recently actually just launched the huge, I don't want to just call it a rebrand. It was much bigger than a rebrand for us. It
Mm.
was really just a synthesis of our DNA and an articulation of what we see as the core of Enscape. We wanted to share that with the outside world,
Mm.
and finally have that become our full identity. Now that we're growing as a firm, we're, I think, about to reach the 6-year mark, the 6-year birthday. We're starting to better understand who we are and who we want to be in this industry, which I think is a great thing. And I encourage anybody listening to go ahead and check out that mission vision on our website and video. I think they're articulated a little better than I can, but it is essentially around this topic of continuing to create accessible design technology, and all in the spirit of kind of being able to fully understand design and the built environment before we get into construction and start actualizing it, of course, with the goal of creating better environments, better communities for all of us.
Yeah. I mean, so that alignment with what the value proposition of architecture is that's a big deal. That's an amazing kind of statement, I think, for a software vendor to, or a vision for a software vendor to have, which is so much in alignment with what the purpose of real architecture should be. I think that's really interesting for a tech company to do that. That's awesome.
I agree, and like I said, this is the reason why I decided to join, because I saw that we have this opportunity. I recognized that everybody was happy and ready to support it, and it helped me understand that we're going to approach this business in the right ways and for the right reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of ways to do not that, and I had other offers as well, obviously from other places, but at the end of the day, it wasn't a question of dollars and cents. It was a question of, I've spent so much of my career devoted to a cause. Am
Mm-hmm.
I ready to just drop it, or worse, am I ready to act against it?
Right.
Absolutely not. That's never going to happen. I don't care what you put in front of me. And everybody here, I think, is on the exact same wavelength. And for me, that means that we can do some really cool things together.
Yeah, interesting. So how much crap did you get from colleagues and other armchair quarterbacks in the industry for switching, going to this other side, that this, some people call it the dark side. Some people call architecture the dark side though too. So what was that like?
It was actually the opposite. I don't think I got any kind of negative feedback, but I think that's twofold. Number one is the reputation of Enscape as it is, right? I mean, everybody kind of knew where I was going, and they, again, the reputation that Enscape helped forge was already speaking for itself before I even got there.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, number two is, I mean, my reputation. I'm I'm Eastern European. I'm not the kind of person to not say what's on my mind.
Mm.
And people know that I've been very outspoken and open about what I see as issues, as opportunities in this industry. And I think people recognize that this move wasn't done for the right reasons. And I do feel very, very grateful for that trust, by the way, I should say, because it's a big thing. And now I have to deliver on that trust and really make my contributions and our contributions exactly in line with the positive expectations of the community.
Yeah, well said. I agree with that sentiment that because of the reputation that you have and because of the reputation that that Enscape has, it does make sense in a meaningful way. And so I'm excited to see where you guys take this. Is there anything that you can share that gives us an idea of things that you guys would love to see happen with this kind of new reveal of the DNA of Enscape and where you guys want to take that?
I think there's not too much concrete that I'm able to share right now, but what I can say is that, I mean, we're actively pursuing this. So I'm currently in the middle of building our R&D team, which is something that we haven't had at Enscape ever before. And we really see them as one of the key strategic pillars to helping us pursue these questions. And again, I can't share the concrete topics just now, but I can give a large hint, because I mean, it's kind of what I talked about with our DNA. We want to solve what we identify as the biggest or most valuable problems for the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see if our interpretation of that aligns with everybody else's. But what I can say is that this isn't a pursuit that we do in a vacuum. We've learned a lot of lessons along the years, both from ourselves and from what we see other people doing in the industry. And I'll be very excited to share with everybody once we do have, pinned down that direction and we're ready to share with everybody else. My fingers are crossed that it can be sooner rather than later, but we really want to focus on quality and just quality.
Yeah. Yep. I get it. So if I could give you a little bit of a wish list that, is obvious stuff, I think, but you talk about the democratization of the tools. Obviously that can go a lot further, I think. So any device, I would love to be able to render my projects from my phone. I would love to be able to render them from my iPad from a location that's not tied to a fast internet connection, because that stuff's happening in the cloud. So I can see so much of architecture, and I just had a really interesting conversation with another person about this. Was, computers was a thing that ran a program, right? Not even an app, right? Mm-hmm. And programs did the heavy lifting of architecture for so long, right? This is AutoCAD, this is Revit. It's bound to a computer. And now we're seeing the shift into the cloud, which enables people to do heavy lifting from anywhere, but also from any device. And I think that rendering as a technology has always been a desktop computer bound thing, that with mobile technologies and better cooling design and better battery optimization, the way that the programs are running on lighter weight devices has led to this explosion that we see now, right? Where I don't think Enscape would be what it is today without it running as well as it does on laptops, period. So Agreed. I can definitely see the runway for that kind of ability for people to have, because especially in a pandemic, right, where everything shifted to, our office went from 7 locations to 350 plus locations overnight, but we could still render this beautiful stuff. Mm-hmm. And so obviously that's a big deal. We didn't have to be bound to the desktop computer with 8 fans screaming in it all the time with water-cooled CPUs and all that stuff, because we could just do it on our laptops. And so I could see that we're not going back to that ever. So where are we going with that? And I could definitely see some amazing potential with that kind of stuff. The other thing is, obviously, you talked about hardware developments and things are getting smaller, it is amazing to see what like an Oculus Quest 2 can do as an untethered device, rendering
Yeah.
3D in real time for a fully immersive sound and video experience and a movement experience. That's incredible. Absolutely immersive, incredible. You're disappointed when you take the goggles off and come back to the real world, kind of impressive. So architects need to be able to do that kind of stuff. Like they need to be able to inspire. And I think, we're on the path to get there, but I would love to see that level of architects inspiring their clients and their clients' clients with this kind of technology to get better architecture, to make better communities that make people happier and more productive, and et cetera, where all that leads.
It's a huge opportunity, and it plays exactly, I think, into the way that we understand that topic of accessibility, because it's a big topic because there's so many barriers to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a knowledge barrier. It's not just a cost barrier. What we're talking about right now is obviously a hardware barrier, which I mean, it's still a very significant thing. So on the headset side, one thing that we're kind of a little bit forced to do is wait for some of these, especially the untethered devices, to kind of catch up just a little bit more in terms of performance before we're able to leverage them. Because the one thing that we don't want to do is kind of present Enscape as it is on your computer and then have a degraded experience somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be able to offer that parity, and unfortunately to that effect, there's some things on the hardware side we just kind of got to wait for.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the distribution of the workforce, I think with or without COVID, that I think would have been a trend that continues, probably not at this accelerated rate, but I think it would have continued to grow. And it is a trend that we've identified, and it'll definitely take some significant work for us to do something there, but it's an avenue we're continuing to explore because it's a trend. We're not going to stop it. People are working on smaller and smaller devices in completely remote locations and situations, and again, we need to recognize if that's a use case in the industry, then that's something that we need to figure out how to support.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I appreciate the kind of big vision. I didn't expect this conversation to go there, but I really am happy to hear about it because, again, like this is the reason that I got into technology as well, on, again, in the air quotes of proper architecture.
Right.
This is the kind of thing that it takes to move the profession and our industry of AEC forward. This is the kind of thinking from an agnostic kind of platform idea. No one firm can do this. It has to be somebody that enables all firms to do this. And you guys are taking that to another level by making it accessible to, like you said, the 80% of firms that are 5 people or less, which it's just a huge number, and enabling them to produce images and project kind of updates at the same level as these much larger firms with much larger teams. And that's a phenomenal way to do that. So I think, you guys being able to operate at that scale it's been a game changer. So I can really appreciate that.
It is exactly what we're trying to do. And unfortunately it's very, very difficult. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, because as you and I know, coming from an experience in this industry, there are some paradigms which are really hard to break down.
Yeah.
And to just expect that you're going to do it through a technology or to a product, I think is a shade naive. And we really have to dig in deeper than that. And that's exactly where the difficulties begin, right? But I think we're on the right path. And I think we're all very, very dedicated to continuing on that path because we do share in that vision. And I'm really excited for what's coming next.
All right. Well, you mentioned a mission and vision video on the website. Can you give us a link that they can go to? I'll include it in the show notes, of course. But if you want to talk about where people can learn more about what you're working on, but also follow you online personally and all that stuff, that would be fantastic.
The Enscape website, enscape3d.com. Otherwise, I think I can direct you to the YouTube channel with some specific links. But our website, enscape3d.com, I think is the biggest source of truth there. And you can get to our blog, you can get to our forums, and that's where we communicate, I think, all these kinds of things, videos and other updates.
One last topic, since you brought up the forums. I mean, it seems to me like the really well-loved companies in AEC technology are the ones that listen to user feedback and engage with their customers. Can you speak a little bit to that side of things from an Enscape perspective?
Yeah, it's absolutely core to what we do. Our product management team and our head of product have set up an ever growing customer advisory board. And this is kind of the more or less the quote unquote official mechanism that we have of getting high level feedback. But in addition to that, we try to turn it into, how do I say it, not just an isolated touch point. We try to really bring it into our everyday. And what I mean by that is, if you look across every team, they're doing it differently, but we're all engaging with customers almost daily. There are some sales calls that I'm on. There are some partner calls that, we have other people on. But the point is to always kind of have this awareness and direct line of communication with our customers, no matter what the feedback is, positive, negative. Are we buying license? Or we get rid of them? Doesn't matter. We want to understand the reasoning and what we can do to be better. And like I said, it looks very, very different team to team, but we're constantly trying to elevate that and make it even more ingrained to what we do. And there are a lot of people, I think, that help us out on that front. We have industry partners and friends like Dan Stein, who's very active, obviously, in the AEC tech thought leadership community, but he's also one of those people that are, almost strategic consultants and partners to us and really help us contextualize our work and tighten that bond to other companies of, the representative of the diversity of the industry. So yeah, something we're very passionate about.
Yeah, I had a conversation on here with Scott Davidson from McNeil, and the way that McNeil engages with its customers is very different than some of the much larger players in the industry. I think there's a love there. And also, I would also say that, he did say on the podcast that they would have never imagined the direction that the product has gone
right
on their own. It's driven by users. And I think that's, to me, one of the most beneficial things to hearing this story today is that people can understand that you don't have to be 1,000 user firm to provide useful feedback to a technology company because of the way that you guys want to engage with your customers. If you're hearing things and you understand where they're coming from and you understand why they're asking for things because you are engaging with them at that level, then it is kind of a level playing field for a lot of people, and they can get in there, get their ideas, and get their needs met, hopefully with an agile software development company like you guys.
Exactly, and we do want to make sure that well, of course, we want to make sure that we don't just limit it to a certain scale of firm, right? Because like we said earlier, I mean, the majority of firms aren't those huge firms, and the majority of our clients are also, if I look at it just from a statistical standpoint, they're not just the biggest players. The biggest players are an important, but ultimately kind of small section of our client base. So if we were to just listen to their use cases, well, we'd be building features that are maybe not relevant for the others. So we really try to bring it all together and make the very, very hard decision of what is going to make the most people happy.
Yeah, well, thanks for going down that little tangent with me there. I think that was an important thing. So last thing is, where can people find out more about you and follow you online, Peter?
Good question. Yeah, so my handle is pretty much the same on GitHub, LinkedIn, Twitter, MITEVPI. And on LinkedIn, I'm just my name, Peter, just spelled funny because I'm Slavic, Petr, Mitev, Mitev. But feel free to reach out. I'm very active, and people kind of talk to me about random things all the time. I'm happy to engage if there's something that you're interested in, or if you just kind of want to bounce some ideas back and forth. But I'm happy to hear from you. And of course, if you're an Enscape user or want to be a user, or you just have some feedback or questions, feel free to reach out to me. Or again, go to enscape3d.com and hit up our customer support if there's anything specific or very technical that you might need help or support with.
Thank you so much for your time and your generosity today. It was fantastic to hear kind of this bigger picture vision and the way that you guys are approaching visualization, this piece of the puzzle that is such a huge piece of what architects do on a day-to-day basis. I think it's fantastic. So it was a great story to tell, for you guys to tell it, and for me to be able to share that with our listeners. So thanks very much for having this conversation today.
Yeah, thank you. It was a great opportunity to be able to tell it. Indeed, it's still fairly new, not as an idea to us, but it's still a fairly novel experience to share it with others. So I'm really excited we got this chance.
Thanks for listening to the Troxel Podcast, and once again, I would like to thank Arc IT for sponsoring this episode. Visit their website at getarchit, that's getarchit.com. This show is part of the Gable Media Podcast Network. You can see all the shows at gablemedia.com. That's GABLMEDIA.com. You can help support what I'm doing here by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts to help get the word out, and of course, share it with your friends. I'd love to hear from you, so leave a comment on the website at trxl.co/podcast, where you can find every episode. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube. Just search for eTroxel. Talk to you soon.